Welcome to our webinar, Areopa webinar about 43 dev tips in 45 minutes. Thanks a lot for joining to all of you who made it today. My name is Tobias Fenster. I am the host for today, but only doing the hosting, only doing the maintenance around it. The two real stars of the event are those two guys that are coming in. Oh, and actually it's the 115th Areopa webinar. Impressive number, of course, but yeah, to introduce the two actual speakers, we have Milan Milinčević, who's joined by none other than Luc van Vugt. So we have those two in the call already. But before we get started, before I hand it over to those two for the content that you actually come to join to listen to, a few housekeeping rules. You might have already noted your mic is muted. So if you have any questions, please post them in the GoToWebinar question window. We will pick them up in the end this time. Luc and Milan will go through the presentation, and then in the end, we will check your questions. I will pick them up and post them to the tool. This webinar, as always, is recorded and will be published on the YouTube channel of Vugt. You can see here a selection of the previous webinars that we had, and there also this one will appear very soon. If you don't want to miss any of the webinars, go to this URL if you haven't done so yet, which gives you the newsletter of all the Areopa webinars, so you will always know what is next, what is coming up. And to already give you an idea, you have the list here. Next one will also be Luc, this time together with Tine, about not having to make test plans anymore. Then we will have Tonya for extra report layouts, starting from the basics, but going into real-time reporting in the end. And we have a bit of a special one, I would say, with Christian Lenz talking about visualizing AL architecture. So it's, yeah, in a sense, also very technical, but also a bit of a different take on it. Then we have Henrik and Stefan, who will talk about the perception of speed. If you can't make it fast, make it feel fast. And then in April, together with Markus Lippert, I will also do one where we want to introduce the concept of GitOps and why you should care to you. Now, if you feel like this sounds interesting, but I also have something else to share, please also reach out, tell us about topics, or if you want to become a speaker. I think in the last few weeks and months, there were some new faces or new voices on the webinar, which is always great to see. If you want to become one as well, please also reach out. And then before we get started, also a big thank you to ForNav for making this happen. We're using their infrastructure, we're using their account here to make it happen. So a big thanks to them for allowing us to do that. Please also consider them for your projects to help them so they can continue to help us. That's it from an introduction perspective. With that, I will hand it over to Milan. So Milan, please share your screen and then we can get started.
Yeah, will do. Thank you, Tobias, for intro. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Perfect. So welcome everyone to yet another Areopa webinar. It's a pleasure to talk here again. Today, Luc and I will talk about tips and tricks in BC, or to be more precise, we prepared 43 dev tips in 45 minutes. So let's just quickly introduce ourselves. We have a lot of things to show, so we will not spend so much time of introduction. My name is, as I said, as Tobias introduced me, Milan Milinčević, and currently I work as a Business Central Tech Lead for BDO in Norway, where I also lead team of developers. Besides that, I try always to stay active in the community. I speak at various conferences, organize user group in Croatia, write blog posts from time to time, to be fair, and support open source projects. So Microsoft recognized all of these efforts and awarded me with MVP award for Business Central from 2024. I think this is more than enough about me. So, Luc, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, and thank you, Milan, and it's a joy to be here with you. I like what you said. I'm working at the moment. I'm not working, but I'm officially QA lead at 4PS and owning my own company. Why I'm not working? You might have heard that I was somehow dropped off a balcony, and I'm still recovering. This is one of my first public appearances this month. And actually, as you can see, this was a talk that Milan did in the end on his own, Poznan Directions EMEA this year. And I'm glad that we can make it together here today. So let's get started.
Let's get started. So our agenda for today is, of course, multiple tips. So let's start. Okay, look, what is this on your seatbelts? Are you ready, guys?
Get ready. We need to get ready.
We need to get ready, but okay, timer was a bit messed up. But no, let's start. So before we start, let me just mention that all of the tips are grouped into categories, and we will present them category by category. So today we have 9 categories, and let's start with the first one, work faster. So the tip number 1 for today is about using VS Code AL extensions. So idea is that often when you do your work, there are already some extensions that can help you do that work faster. Of course, there are multiple of the extensions which can help you, but we just put the 4 here, the 4 ones that we think that are very important. So the first one is AL Dev Tools from Andrzej. Literally, I call this extension as a Swiss Army knife because you have a bunch of various tools and procedures which can help you solve or automate things in your repo. Besides that, what also often I use is AL code actions from David Velkov, because every time when I write some code multiple times a day, I want to extract some code to separate procedures. And in order to do this, you don't need to do it manually. You can just use the extract to procedure option from this extension. It is literally the extension that I use multiple times per day. The third extension, which is quite handy, is Git length. What I like about this one is that every time when you are doing something in your VS Code or when you are refactoring something, you can check each line in the files when those lines were created, what part of which pull request that was a part. So basically, then you can easily track all of the changes and you can easily see the functionality, how it was created initially. And the last extension that I wanted to mention, it is AL Object ID Ninja from Vieco. Literally, I cannot imagine working in a team in a same project without this extension. It is saving us a lot of time when it comes to ID collision. So value for this tip is, of course, that we won't let proving tooling help getting you the work done, and I would say work done faster. Just before we go to the second tip, I want to briefly say that we design all slides to follow the same structure. So each slide shows the tip number and tip title in the middle. Below that, you will find some additional information about the tip. On the screen, on the iPhone screen, you will see value of the tip, why we actually think that this tip is important. And at the bottom, you will see a link or multiple links for more information. Since we won't have time to go into all of the details, basically you can just later click on those links and find out more. Okay, let's start then for tips 2. So the second tip is about shortcut in VS Code. The idea here is that you don't need to use your mouse for each navigation while you are doing development. Idea is that you can use shortcuts in VS Code and it will help you doing your work faster. So for example, if you want to just move some code, lines of code, you don't need to copy paste it. You can just use Alt and then arrow up and down, for example. And this is just one silly example, but with a bunch of these shortcuts, you will work tremendously faster than usual. So the value here is that doing your coding as efficient and simple as possible. And what is also important is that you can create your custom shortcuts. So that means that if you are not satisfied with existing ones or if you want to change them, you are more than free to create your own. Tip number 3 is about using the code history repo from Stefan Maron. This is the repo that I cannot imagine working without. Basically, idea here is that you can compare different versions and different localizations inside of one repo, then how it actually works. Each branch is different version and different localization, so moving to different versions is just moving through different branches. This actually speeds up not only debugging, but new development a lot, because you can see all of the standard code and all of the changes that Microsoft did in each version. So for example, if Microsoft, God forbid, introduced some bug, you can easily trace this bug when it is introduced and how the code looks. So the value here is that you can easily reference multiple BC versions and localization in one single repo, helping find changes very efficiently. How this looks, basically, this is the public repo. You should just clone it and start using it. Huge shout out to Stefan for the repo. Beside this repo, there is additional existing repo called the sandbox code history, where Stefan is every day taking the code from the sandbox and updating it there. So you can also see all of the changes there. Second category is work smarter, and I think that, Luke, we are going now to you.
Yeah, so this is the new world, you could say, agentic development. Actually, we have been using it a lot, I think, most of us using GitHub Copilot. Let agents help you to do the work, and we made this a bit broader because it's not just GitHub Copilot. There are BC agents that are supporting standards, development standards, etc. Let them help you. And if it's not clear enough, I've added a new link at the bottom, agentic coding. You could say kind of guidelines written by Jeremy Fiska on the alguidelines.dev environment. Help you to speed up development, reduces repetitive work. Of course, it works in real time, and it's like in the value. It's your companion. You can ask for coding suggestions, and also reviewing your code. And one of the last bullet, componentization of your code. If you know about solid, you're going more the solid way. The more you go the solid way, the better agentic development is going to be able to help you. We'll get back to that later also. So tip 4, make use of it. Let's go to the next one. Tip 5, use micro commits. I don't know if there is anybody still left that's not using source code management, but if you make a change, commit it. If a change is okay, and of course we'll get to testing also, but if you've tested it, and preferably small steps, you make a small change, test it, okay, commit it. Yeah, don't wait till you're finished. If you finished everything, you might find out with testing that something is wrong, and where did it go wrong? If you make small step, you can see that next small step failed, okay, then everything up till the last small step was okay. So you can smoothly roll back and easily find where the problem was. Yeah? So you're not lost in big space because you did a huge commit. Yeah? There's a small reference to an article which is worthwhile reading. Tip 6, limit event subscriptions. I think event subscription doesn't need any introduction here. But what might be new to some or relevant to refresh is that we have so many events now. Microsoft already over a year ago started to make an inventory in the sense of, wait, this is going to be too big. What can we leave behind? And that's also for us to look at. Avoid unnecessary subscriptions. It looks like a great thing, but if you have too many, it becomes too slow. Yeah, it was a bit too fast. Let me first go back, please, for the value. So if you have too many, it will slow down your solution. So keep your solution fast and scalable by following event subscription best practices. Read about this. Okay, the next tip, number 7. Manage CI/CD solution. I for integration, D for deployment. Yeah, make use of what is available in our world already. So AL Go for GitHub, AL Ops, and Cosmo Alpaca. If you don't know about this, you can read about it. By the way, if you want, and of course the link in the recording doesn't work, but feel free to put a note in the comments once the recording is out, or contact one of us to share with you the slide deck. Yeah. So we can't do without this anymore. If you don't automatically do your integration of your solution and deploy it to a site, it's error prone. So it's going to reduce manual work, improve the reproducibility and such the reliability, and you're able to catch issues earlier because you run it frequently. Yeah, automate the build and tests. That's the value. Well, that's okay. You could.
Yeah, I was just a bit too fast because I just wanted to talk again. So sorry, look about that. Tip number 8 is about implicit commit. So it is about code unit.run. Idea here is that if you wrap the code unit.run inside the if statement, it will automatically create a commit at the end. So basically, if the code unit.run fails, then it will roll back all of the changes. And this is the best practice or best scenario if you want to use it for batch processing, because then you are avoiding system stops and you are sure that if something is processed, it is written into the database. So as I said, if you have code unit.run without if statement, then this will not have commit, this will not start as a new transaction. The value here is, of course, control error handling and prevent system failures. If you want to find out more about this, even Luke wrote some long time ago some blog about it, so please find the link useful and read more about it. Tip number 9 is about implementing tooltips on table level. So idea is that instead of adding the same tooltips onto multiple pages which are referencing the same table, you can have all of the tooltips defined in one place, and that way you have one centralized place for the information. What is also important here that, for example, if you want to have some specific page for the same table where you want to put some different tooltips, then you can just still put them on the page level, and then they will override on this page the ones from the table. This way, it is much easier to maintain them, and it will reduce redundancy, of course, especially later if you need to translate them. So value here is, of course, improve documentation by making these implementation checks easier. It is nothing special. Here is the link, but basically you are just creating tooltip property on a table level instead of page level. Tip number 10 is about moving to Word layouts. Microsoft still spending quite a lot of time to modernize the reports. And back in the time, the RDLC was the main layout. More than everyone was using it. But now, from a few versions ago, Microsoft started investing more and more into Word layouts, and they even Directions Mia said that they will start obsoleting RDLC slowly and slowly, more and more. Basically, idea is then just we should use those. Why we are using them? They are much simpler to edit than RDLC. So, for example, in my company, how we are doing here is basically developers are preparing the data sets and putting some basic layout, and then we are letting consultants to do actual layout changes or even some power users. What is difference between RDLC and Word here is that Word has a static layout, so you cannot do any dynamic things inside of the layout. You need to prepare your data set wisely, and you need to put more effort in doing that. But once you have your data set prepared, it will be much easier for you to have the actual layout. And I actually really like this one because I didn't find any developer who likes doing the layouts, and now we can just delegate this to other people in the team. So value here is easier maintenance also for end user. Tip 11 is look again.
Yeah. Organize your solution folders in folders by category, not object type. In the past, maybe in small ones, it was standard to have them organized as pages, as code units, etc. But move to organizing by category. If you move to the next, click on it, it will show you an example from the Microsoft. So the value is feature-based folder structure for better overview. It's easier to go into pricing objects when they're organized like this than they were part of some code units in the code unit folder and page in the page folder. Okay.
Oh, that's me. I was quiet for a second because
I thought
that you I see.
I was very silent.
That was a bit unusual. Find and fix this is the next category. So tip number 12 is about using data administration page for cleanup and analysis. Why I'm mentioning this is because often when people want to do something, they tend to reinvent the wheel, or they are not even aware of some things that already exist in BC. And that happened to me a while ago, because as I hope most of you know, media and the tenant media table, when you are creating some images in BC, they can tend to stay in database even they are not referenced anymore. And because of that, I wanted to just get rid of all of these media orphans. And instead of writing my own procedure for that, and instead of scheduling my job queue for that, I was just checking. I thought Microsoft needed to do something, and then I found out this data administration page where you can take a look about all of the things regarding data, and then under there you will also see option to delete, to schedule the task to delete all of the orphan media. So basically the best tip for me here is just that you should use built-in tool for not only for data cleanup and administration, but for everything in BC where there is a way, instead of building a custom solution where there is not needed. So this is actually how this page looks. And then inside the actions, there is the action. There are multiple actions that you can actually utilize, but one of them is to get rid of the reference media. Tip 13 is you look.
Yeah, page inspection. Probably known to everybody, but it's good to mention, especially that you can do more than just have a look at the fields. You can have a look at what extensions do contribute to this page, which fields are part of a certain extension, what filters are applied. And surely, I mean, that's where I often use it for, oh yeah, what table is this page looking at? Is this really the standard table, or is it maybe a customized table, or whatever? So make use of this one. It's, for those dinosaurs here, much better than it was in the very past. This is also updating while you're moving through records, etc. Make use of it. Simple way.
Yeah.
Sorry
for interrupting. What I really like about this one is that you can click on view table and you don't need anymore to type table in URL to get like table number to see the table data. You can just see the table from here.
Yeah, and go to Visual Studio if you want to. Snapshot debugging. A short reminder for those who haven't used it that much or lost in it. Shortcuts F7 and Alt F7 from VS Code. It's of course not debugging, it's recording. But when you effectuate it or execute it with F7 and stop it with Alt F7, you have a recording which you can go through like your debugging. Any breakpoint you set in the debugger becomes a snap point. That's where things are recorded. In between snap points, there is no view on what is happening in variables, etc. But on the snap point, there is where you can have a look at the different variables. And yes, it's a non-intrusive way to, let's say, debug production environments. You might know in SaaS you cannot debug a production environment at all. You can still do it on-prem, but there you can do this recording. Let's move to the next.
Tip 15 is about telemetry. And I will not speak much about telemetry. I mean, this is a topic where people had the whole sessions about just telemetry itself. What I just want to say here is that if you are not using it, you really should start using the telemetry. It will provide you really useful insights, which you can then analyze and improve your customers' systems. But idea is not that you should just set it up. Idea is that you should proactively each day monitor what's happening on this system and then try to take some actions. Also, you don't need to invest a lot of time into building some custom dashboards. There are already some tools out there, some open source dashboards that you can utilize, but also Microsoft created other apps which are completely free to use. You just need to have the license and then you can use them and you can analyze your customers' systems. This is just idea from our custom dashboards, how we are writing dashboards and how you can write the queries inside the who's-to-query language pane. So tip 16 is about database performance pages. All of our customers are using the BC in cloud version of the BC, and as you know, you cannot access database in cloud. And often you just want to check some performances of the database. You also want to understand maybe if there are some bottlenecks, and still you don't have much options to do anything. And idea here is what Microsoft provided for us are two pages. One is database missing indexes, where basically SQL Query Optimizer suggestions you can see about the missing indexes. My tip here is just don't blindly implement those. Just think about whether you actually see the point of these and try to test it before adding them. Also, regarding database page statistics, you will see all of the weight statistic on this database, and then you can try to analyze what is going on. It is not the same as on-prem, but at least we have some options to administer or to at least check how our database is performing there. The next category is about writing performant code, and I think that the first tip is from Luke.
Yeah, tip 17, use SetAutoCalcFields. We do have calc fields, and SetAutoCalcFields make use of the right one. SetAutoCalcFields is meant to be set up before you query the database, so it's joined into one big query. And of course, it's about repetitive calls to records like a find set, repeat until next. Don't use calc fields there, preferably, because that's, as the reference here goes to an article by A.J. Kaufman. In his case, it was 23 times faster to use SetAutoCalcFields than calc fields. Simplifies your code also, less load on the SQL server. It's not just only speeding up things in the sense that it's faster to get your result, but also lessering the load on the SQL server. An example, if you want to, is this one. Yeah. So you have to call this before find set, and like with calc fields, you can have a longer list of arguments for any flow field you want to be evaluated. Number 18, page background tasks. A lot of things have been optimized in the client to get page parts updated in the background, etc. But when you build your processes, a card, when it's opened, for example, if you didn't use page background tasks yet, go and read about this here and take our hint or tip here as a starting point to do so, because not everything that is happening while a user is getting into a page needs to be instantly available. So if you can push it to the back, and here is a kind of diagram, the idea is that asynchronously you push your process to the background. It's going to be executed while page is already open, and as soon as the user realizes, maybe then your page background task has been executed and the result is in the page instead of needing to wait for the page to appear. Yeah. Another one, make use of TextBuilder, those, let's say, inherited constructions from .NET, where you can build up text much faster than using text variables and arrays or whatever, which we have from long time already in AL. Faster execution, when gathering strings together. It's quite easy to use. It's using lesser memory, and your code also becomes much better structured, like in this example, where lines are appended to the same text builder object, in this case, list of tables. Tip 20 is empty and delete all. Yeah, if you call it delete all on an empty table, it locks that table. So, and that means that anything happening after that cannot continue because there's a lock on the table which has no records. And normally a lock could be per record. Delete all, of course, if a filter is set, could be to a subset, but make use of the call to IsEmpty before you call delete all to improve concurrency. If you lock the table, nobody can get into it anyway. If there are no records in it, nothing can be done by other processes. So prevent locking where it's not needed. If we go to the next one, this is a reference. This is taken from the reference below, the more information. It's a good read. Make use of it.
Okay, thank you, Luke. The tip 21 is about using partial records, or how to call it in AL, SetLoadFields method. With SetLoadFields, what we can do is, before fetching the data from database, we can define which fields we want to retrieve. Idea here is that we should know which of the fields we only need in the process. Later in the process, if we need some more fields, we will, or if we use some fields that are not referenced initially, then we will trigger additional loading, just-in-time loading. That means that the system platform will send an additional query to database, one additional query, where basically then we lose all of the benefits that we wanted initially. So just use this wisely. Maybe what is relevant here to say is if you are using the data set on your report in standard ones, the system will just get, it will use partial record to fetch all of the standard, all of the fields that are defined into this data set. If you want to add some new ones fields, or if you want to use some additional fields later in the code, you should use addLoadFields method to just add additional fields. Value here is just improve performance by retrieving only necessary fields and reducing database load. So yeah, this is the main benefit of using partial records. As I said, it is very simple usage out of it. What is maybe important to say that by default, all of the primary key fields and all of the standard system fields will be also fetched from database every time. But still, if you want to fetch just only primary field or any field that you want to fetch, you still need to define one field at least in the method. Tip 22 is about using query object instead of nested loop. Often when doing some calculations and when you have like repeater inside the repeater, you are doing filtering and fetching that in the AL level. Instead, what you can do is you can speed up this data retrieval just having it defined into query. So basically then we can filter at the source and we can avoid these unnecessary loops. Maybe what was also important here to mention is that the query object will always go directly to database. It will always fetch data from database. It will not use it from cache. So in some cases, still having repeaters maybe could work faster. So just try to be careful when you are using it and try to measure it, because if you are using something very often, then maybe it is better to use normal find set method. But if you are using it not so often, if it is not being the cache anyhow, then just use query object. Value, as I said, is optimized performance by filtering and joining data directly at the SQL level. Tip 23 is about lazy evaluation, or about missing a lazy evaluation in AL. So that means that if you have multiple conditions inside one if statement in AL, all of these conditions will be evaluated. So that means that even one of them fails, other ones will be still evaluated, no matter about whether this actually matter. So because of that, just what is important is just to use first the one that are less costly at the beginning of your procedure, and then going further to the one that will cost you more. That way you will maybe have some performance benefits. And of course, in most cases, then you will need to use separate if statements. If you want to find out more about this, you can read from Teddy, the nice blog post. So here is how basically they did it. This is a screenshot from the Microsoft standard code, where basically first they are checking value and then they are doing it. Tip 24 is about using data transfer for efficient upgrades. Idea here is then if you are moving some logic from one table to another, or from one field to another field, when you are upgrading your app or extension, what you should do is basically, instead of writing your code of moving it directly, you should use data transfer data type, because it is much faster than the normal way. Why? Because Microsoft optimized it to move this directly in the SQL level. They issue more efficient SQL statements there. So what is also relevant here, you can use data transfer only in upgrade code units. So that means that you cannot use it normally, but only in upgrade code units. And because of that, your upgrade time will be much faster. That means that downtime of clients will be much less. As Microsoft said, using a data transfer is around 50 times faster than without using it in data upgrades. So how you can use that one? Basically, you are defining the tables and then the field that you want to move, and basically you are just using copy fields, and everything is moved. Tip 25 is about using alguidelines.dev. Basically, why you should use that. Most of the experts in community in the field, they are using these IL guidelines to write some best patterns and best categories or best scenarios how you should develop your code. So that means that you will be able to get most out of everything without reinventing the wheel again, or without just thinking how you should solve something. You will at least have consistent, reusable, and high-performing code by just adapting these patterns. And just use it. Luke already mentioned one of the tips also was there inside of alguidelines.dev. There is actually a lot of those tips, and if you are maybe don't agree with something, or if you have some tip, you still also can contribute to that. So please feel free to at least read the existing ones. So how the page looks, it is basically like this, and then inside the docs you can see the design patterns as well, and in discussions you can start the new discussions, or you can contribute to existing ones.
Yeah.
Luke, we are now back to you.
A very small one, proper use of global variables. From the past, when I started this world, there were only global variables, but no locals at all. And now it's more like, do it local and be wise in using globals. Keep it simple. Don't make something global if it doesn't need to be. Why? Because it's also a performance kind of thing. Especially, well, in general, keep your code clean and easy to maintain by using global variables only when needed. So be, as a developer, precise in what is global and local, so that nobody following you later on in the code starts to doubt, why is this a global variable? By the way, in the next example that we have on the next screen, this is unfortunately something that Microsoft changed. I don't know if you know about the posting process. The posting process can only happen depending on settings in a certain allowed posting period. And the two variables here allow posting from and to, they should have been global here. Why? Because now every time again it's checking on those two variables. Is it within with every line it posts, is it within the allowed period? So if you make something global, it sticks on the stack. If you make it local, it's cleaned up. So make a wise choice. The next, write readable code. The previous one was more about performance, but often these two, well, have some link to each other's interfaces. An object type, which is actually an object, a real object, interfaces, which allows you to build modularly. So if you want to set up some code, a process, a flow, and you could call up a specific object in a specific context, interfaces is what you want to use. So you don't need to have the implementation already fully done, but the only thing that you define with an interface is connection. What is the signature? What are you going to hand over to the implementation? They're easy to extend and replace, like a plugin for a specific situation. In this case, the interface is A, implementation A. In the next run, it will be B. And especially with testing, this is going to help you a lot, because you could replace the interface by what they call a mock. And there are different ways of mocking, so you don't need to run the whole implementation. You just can say, I did hit the interface, and that's enough for me. Value flexible code components that are easy to use and replace. Thank you. And there's a lot more. There's a link to a lot of webinars that Jaco did. SetRange versus SetFilter. I'm often asked, what is the difference between the two? If I use a SetFilter, is there a different performance kind of consequence? No. In essence, SetFilter and SetRange can more or less, well, not SetRange cannot do everything, but more or less achieve the same. But make wise use of it. When to use SetRange is when you're going to filter on a single value or a range of values. And don't use a SetFilter for that. Use the SetRange. That's very clear then. Use SetFilter for more complex, or you could even say flexible filters, like including wildcards. So by using SetRange or SetFilter, that's the value of this tip, make the intention clear by using the one or the other. There was a nice LinkedIn article discussion by Alberto, and this is some examples from in. And it was nice, the addition that came from Eric Vugt and Jens Müller-Pedersen. Something I think I realized, but not that well as he wrote it down. SetRange is type safe. Yeah, so the field, the first argument, should, or let's say, put a constraint on the values put as the second or the third argument. So it's type safe. You can't put an integer in place when you're filtering on a posting date. SetFilter is not type safe. The comment from Jens Müller is that SetFilter actually should always have a filter expression that has an operator like equals to or greater or smaller than. We never use the equal to in the string. We do apply greater than or less than or equal, greater than and equal to, but be aware of that. Yeah, thank you. Was the right time.
Just a quick note from the moderator, you now have 15 minutes for the last 15 tips.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Preprocessor directives. You can mark your code with preprocessor directives, so you can build different versions of your code. And when compiling and setting a certain directive, it will compile only that part where the preprocessor directive applies. So you could have multiple versions in your code. Maintaining a stable code value that adapts to different environment or versions. Go to the next slide or next part. You might have seen these kind of things in standard code also, and slowly these will be removed because Microsoft introduces a kind of new feature and needs to maintain code for the old and the new one meanwhile still, and this will be removed slowly over time from your code. Next is
Perfect.
Yeah, writing consistent code.
This is the code, and I think that's me. Yeah, cool. This one is a bit maybe dummy, but use IntelliSense when developing. It will just help you with consistency, time saving, but also it will reduce annoyance, especially if someone needs to review your code and then see that you are using lowercase variables instead of not being consistent with the variable itself, or if there is some casing, I would say is the biggest problem that I see here, and I often find those. So just use IntelliSense, press enter, don't type everything by yourself. It is quite simple, and this is just the example how it looks if you are not using the IntelliSense. Tip 31 is about clear versus reset versus init. Basically, just knowing the difference when you are initializing or clearing the variables. So idea is that you should use clear when you want to empty the variable itself. Reset is when you want also to remove filters regardless of filter group and key settings. And also when you are reusing the record variable, then just use reset. And init is of course when you are initializing the variable, when you are just inserting the variable when you are creating the new record and inserting into the database. Basically it will reinitialize fields except the primary key fields. So value here is prevent unexpected behavior by choosing the correct method for resetting the variables. Here is also a good blog post where you can read about it a bit more. And tip 32 is a really nice tip, and it really goes nicely with the one from before, regarding lazy evaluation, because idea here is just that you will create a multiple if statements. So basically at the beginning of your business logic, you will just check all of the conditions, and then you will do like if not then exit. Instead of having multiple deep nested statements, you will have one below each other, which will keep your code much cleaner. It will be much easier to read that code, and later if someone needs to maintain this code, it will be much easier for them to get familiar with it. There is this if not then exit or early exit strategy is also part of the alguidelines.dev, so you can find out more about that there. So here is one example how you can do it even with the find set, but I like this more, where you can basically first checking whether it is temporary record and whether it is no good, and then at the end you are doing additional check, and then you have your business logic. So it is much easier to read the code this way. And tip 33 is about passing your variables by reference or versus passing them by value. That means basically whether you will put var in front of parameter in your procedures. Basically, if you put var, that means that you are passing by reference. That means then once you change something in some procedures down there the line, it will also reflect the behavior of the initial variable. People often forget this and also often put passing by reference everywhere, even where it is not needed. So just mind this record behavior, because you can introduce not right data changes, or you can introduce some bugs. Basically, value here is just to understand how data is passed to avoid these unintended modifications and performance issues. Tine created a really nice blog post where explain why var doesn't matter, why it is different if you are passing by reference. Next to you.
Yeah, be consistent with object and file naming. So there have been different ways, but there's now a leading one. If you click through it, Milan, so follow file naming conventions. And for example, use the CRS extension to help you do that. You can set up settings.json to get this always executed when you're creating a new project, creating new objects in an existing project. Yeah? Improve your code discoverability and maintenance. If you go to the next small example from standard, this is the file name from the file. And if you click next one, you can see it relates to the name of the object that's inside. Okay, next one. Write testable code. Of course, one of my main topics. Write test while developing. Yeah, explore the TDD road as one of the bullets. Have instant feedback. So while you're creating your solution, write your test at the same time. The thing is, if you do it afterwards, tests afterwards will always suffer from the fact that they are extra time to spend. No, use your tests while you're developing. Get feedback on what you create. So the last bullet, prevent the pitfall of building tests as tests. No, tests are part of the way of working. Next one, create test plan. Test plan is setting up a list of scenarios that you're going to implement. So what do you want the software to do, but also how are you going to test them? On the down part, there are two references. I added an extra one, the December 8th session, which I will do with Tine. Will show you how AI can help you to do this. I think if you don't create test plans, you're missing a lot in your steps to develop things. It's not about testing, it's about what are you going to implement. This is a slide from the presentation I did with Christopher Anderson and how you could move from old style code into solid code. Okay, go to the next one, 37. It's a Dutch way of saying, break down your code in smaller methods. That's relating to good coding anyway, but it makes your testing also easier. If you have smaller methods, it's easier to write and let AI also help you to get tests in place. Reduce your complexity, makes testability much easier. It's much easier for anybody to step in and read things, so the clarity is much better. And yes, AL code action is a great thing for helping you to cut down things in smaller methods. Better, understandable, and maintainable code. Next step, write secure code. I think, no, this is your.
This is me, about writing secure code, or it is about using SecretText data type when you are using some secret, when you are using some tokens, or when you are using some secrets in your code. So idea here is that just with this, you will be able to encrypt sensitive data, and once you are moving it from procedure to procedure, from place to place, it will be encrypted, so no one will be able to see. Even if you are debugging, you will not be able to see the value from there. It is very simple to use it, and it is very helping you to protect sensitive data. So how you can use basically this, you are just defining secret text variable, and then you cannot see what's happening there. Platform is encrypting this automatically. Tip 39 is about using access modifiers. An idea here is that you should just control visibility of your code, of your data there. So basically, it will also help you later with refactoring if you need, especially if you are an app source app. Then idea is that you should keep all of the code internal as much as possible, and then just expose something which is really needed, some APIs or whatever you want to expose to your partners. Because if you have it exposed, then that means that people also can then use it in a way how they want, and it will be much harder for you to refactor it later, or to save your maybe data. So basically just expose AL objects only when needed, enabling you to refactor and maintain code much easier is the value here. Here is just the types of access modifiers that you have. You have also a really nice link where you can check more about different levels. IntelliSense is basically idea property in app.json where you can define internal to be visible in which app. The main idea to use this is for testing, of course, but you should be careful because if someone knows your app ID, then it can be hijacked, and because of that, it can then get your maybe data. So just make sure once you are once you are not publishing, but once you are building your app, just make sure to remove internalsVisibleTo from app.json. So basically from your production app.json, it should be removed. I mean, you will not do this manually. If you are using the pipeline or the CI/CD solution, then it will be defined there and you don't need to worry about that. So just be careful about it. And here is a way how you can basically define in app.json multiple apps that you want to expose your internals.
Yeah, almost there.
Almost there.
Yeah, test with permissions. If you have your code working, that doesn't mean that all your users can use it because permissions have to be set. So make sure to also write your tests, including permissions. Simulate user access because you don't want to be called later on. We can't use it. Oh, we forgot the permissions. So include them in your test. The reference is to a Areopa webinar I did a long time ago. Think UX, the last topics, last tips, and I think they're both mine. Make use of actionable error messages so you get a user-friendly experience, and it's not like blocking them, but also you can make use of the fact that you have a button, and if we go to the next one, where you can say, okay, this is the way you can fix it, set value to blank in this case, for example. So provide the user an easy way to act upon a message. Next slide. The last one, collecting errors. Yeah, of course, we do have code in our code, errors being executed, being called upon. And that basically, from standard, it means it will block the continuation, but you can make it collect those errors and make use of them so they show up later in a list, and that the user then can go through the data to fix everything instead of error, fix, next error, fix. So the next slide shows us an example from standard where error messages are collected. That's it. We made it. Actually, not within the 45 minutes. And there's Q&A.
But we are still in time, I think. These webinars are a bit longer than 45, so I think that we are good.
Yeah.
But
actually, before we go to the question, there's of course one main question in the background, and let's move quickly to that. And then I see there's one question, I believe, to be answered, but nevertheless, why did we call it 43 tips? Well, there's some magic about this. So how did we get to the 43? I'm 63. That's 6 divided by 3 to the power 2 gives you a 4. And Milan's age is, well, almost half of it. That's the 3 and the 1 gives us the...
This is really quite advanced mathematics.
Yeah. And if you don't believe it, we even have another argument, number 2. So these are our birth dates. And if we take the dates, we also get to 43. That's the reason why we have 43 tips.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening to us. And now we are open to answer the questions.
Thanks a lot, guys. What a firework of tips. I can't imagine how this has worked in a 45-minute session. But anyway, we have one question from the audience that is if they get the presentation, especially for the links. If I understood you correctly, Luc, you will put those in the comments on YouTube, or how do you transport those?
Oh, if like I said before, if they want to have the slides, and I will ask to get that also made as a note on the recording, contact us. You know where to find us, and then we send you the slide deck.
Okay, very good. Then I would say, as we are slightly over time already, I would have 1 or 2 questions, but I would rather then ask you directly later. So let's close the session then. I hope you can now see my screen again. Just a brief reminder of the upcoming webinars. If you don't have them on your calendar yet and you see something interesting, please do so, add them. We would be happy to see you again. And with that, it's time to say thank you, especially today to you two, Milan and Luc, from and for the whole webinar team. And with that, I would say we can close it. Those are the links in case you want to stay updated, want to get the information about the upcoming webinars or watch the recordings. Thanks a lot for joining today. Thanks for the amazing content. And then see you again soon, I hope.
Bye-bye.